A strange calm enters the room before any facts do. It does not feel like pressure, it feels like certainty. The voice is smooth, the posture is settled, the timing is perfect. A claim lands with the weight of a verdict, and your mind starts rearranging itself to match it. This is not persuasion, this is certainty hijack. It is a dark social mechanic where someone borrows the tone of truth to overwrite your perception, then forces you to defend reality like it is an opinion. The danger is not that they lie. The danger is that they make you doubt your ability to know. It begins with a familiar sensation. You walk away from an interaction feeling slightly tilted, not confused in a dramatic way. More like you misplaced a small object in your own mind. You replay a sentence and it looks different each time. You remember your own reaction and it feels exaggerated, then it feels justified, then it feels childish. The event itself becomes less solid than their interpretation of it. Certainty hijack has one goal. It wants your inner narrator to resign. Once that happens, you stop evaluating what happened and start managing how you look while it happens. You become a translator for someone else's story about you. That is where control lives, in the part of you that edits itself. A room can feel friendly while it quietly becomes unsafe. Anonymized scene. A small group meets in a familiar setting, not work, not romance, just a circle that usually feels normal. One person tells a story with a neat moral at the end. Another person mentions a detail that does not fit the moral. The atmosphere shifts. The storyteller smiles, still warm, then states a correction with calm finality. The correction is not about the detail. It is about the right to describe the detail. The correction sounds caring. It also contains a warning. The warning is that disagreement will be treated as a character issue, not as a difference in memory. The first signal is speed. They do not let a moment stay neutral. They classify it immediately. A pause becomes guilt. A boundary becomes hostility. A simple preference becomes a character flaw. They name your motive before you name your experience. Then they talk as if the naming is proof. Speed is a weapon because it prevents calibration. When reality is fresh, it still has texture. It has tone, context, sequence, and the private sense of what you intended. Speed scrapes that texture off. It turns a living moment into a flat label. Once it is flat, it is easy to stack and file and reuse. The second signal is the echo. They repeat your words with a twist so small it feels like agreement. You hear your own sentence return to you, but the meaning shifts by a few degrees. They keep the nouns and change the temperature. They keep the storyline and swap the motive. They keep your language and replace your agency. The echo is how they build plausibility. They do not need you to believe them fully. They need you to hesitate. They need you to think, maybe I said it wrong, maybe I sounded harsher than I meant, maybe they are just seeing something I cannot see. That maybe is the opening. The third signal is public gravity without public proof. They lean on an invisible audience. They speak as if a wider standard already exists. They imply that normal people would agree with them. They do not cite anyone. They do not show evidence. They simply act like the judgment is already settled. This works because the nervous system fears exile more than error. When someone frames your reality as socially unsafe, you start bargaining with yourself. You trade precision for acceptance. You trade truth for peace. You trade your own memory for the relief of being allowed back into the room. The fourth signal is moral fog. They use a clean, righteous vocabulary that feels hard to oppose. They say things like respect, accountability, safety, decency, maturity, growth. These words can be real. In the wrong hands, they become mist. Mist hides the ground. Mist makes you walk slower and apologize for stepping. Moral fog does not accuse you directly. It makes your position feel shameful by default. It turns your defense into a confession. You are not answering a claim anymore. You are trying to prove you deserve to speak. The fifth signal is the pivot from event to identity. A single moment becomes your nature. A single reaction becomes your pattern. A single boundary becomes your entire personality. They move from what happened to who you are, because events can be clarified and identities can be managed. Once the frame is identity, they get to set the terms. They can demand transformation instead of explanation. They can demand submission instead of repair. They can demand silence instead of resolution, and if you resist, they call it denial. The sixth signal is the trap of impossible specificity. When you disagree, they demand you explain every detail, not to understand, to exhaust. They want a timeline, exact words, exact tone, exact intention, exact emotional state. They want a perfect record from a human mind. Then they use normal imperfection as proof that you are unreliable. This is how the leash is built. You stop stating reality plainly because you know you cannot defend every molecule of it. You start qualifying, softening, pre-apologizing. You speak like a person asking permission to have memory. That is the point. The seventh signal is the false calm. They stay composed while they say something sharp. They call their composure evidence. They call your emotion bias. They make your nervous system the criminal and their stillness the judge. They do not have to be correct. They only have to look correct. Composure is not truth. It is a style. A practiced style can carry a lie with a straight spine. A shaken voice can carry the truth. Certainty Hijack swaps those realities. It makes performance the metric. The eighth signal is the retroactive rewrite. After the moment passes, they return with an updated version. They tell you what you meant. They tell you what you were really doing. They tell you what the interaction actually was. They treat your recollection like a draft and theirs like the final copy. The rewrite often arrives with soft pity, not anger, a gentle correction, a small sigh, a look that says, "I am trying to help you see yourself." That kindness is a blade with a velvet handle. It makes resistance feel rude. The ninth signal is the compressed choice. They offer you two options, both of which accept their frame. Either you admit fault and learn, or you deny and prove you are unsafe. Either you accept their interpretation, or you are stubborn. Either you change, or you are the kind of person who never changes. Notice what is missing. Your reality is not an option. Neutrality is not an option. A third path is not offered. The choices are costumes for the same surrender. The 10th signal is the request for an emotional tax. They want you to pay with self-humiliation. They want you to prove sincerity by getting smaller. They want a performance of regret, not a repair of facts. They want you to kneel so the story looks true. When you pay the tax once, the rate changes. Soon the tax is due whenever you disagree. Soon you apologize for your tone before you state your point. Soon you treat your own clarity as aggression. That is how an internal censor gets installed. There is a deeper layer that makes this mechanic so effective. Most people carry a private fear that they are secretly wrong, not wrong about one thing, wrong as a person. Certainty Hijack feeds that fear. It speaks to the part of you that wants to be good, wants to be safe, wants to be approved by the invisible crowd. It offers relief through submission. It offers peace through self-erasure. This is where Stoic discipline matters, not as coldness, as sovereignty. Stoicism is the refusal to outsource the steering wheel of your mind. It is the ability to separate sensation from story. It is the skill of holding your own perception without turning it into a crusade. Fate acceptance matters too, not as passivity. As clarity about what is not yours to control. You cannot control whether someone plays this game. You can control whether you finance it with your attention, your explanations, and your self-doubt. You can control whether you keep returning to the same fog, and asking it to become air. The defense begins with tempo. Slow the frame down. When someone tries to classify the moment at speed, the delay becomes the measurement. The delay creates space where reality regains texture. Tone returns, sequence returns, your body's signal returns, not motives, not identity, not morality, just events. You said this, I said this, then this happened, then I left, that is all. It sounds plain because it is plain, and plain is hard to bend. When they twist your words, the fight over the twist becomes the trap. A single restatement holds more power than a long debate. The restatement can be calm and short. It can be the same sentence twice, spoken without heat. An echo dies when it does not get a second mouth. A distortion loses power when it cannot recruit your energy. There is also the proof burden. Certainty Hijack forces you into the role of historian under crossfire. It asks for perfection so it can punish normal gaps. In real life, memory is a living thing. It holds impressions, not transcripts. A person can know something happened even when the exact phrasing is gone. A person can remember a shift in tone even when the words are blurred. That knowledge is valid even when it is not cinematic. A boundary around meaning can exist without drama. The sentence can be simple. I do not agree with that framing. It is not an attack. It is not a debate. It is a line drawn around interpretation. It tells them they do not get to rename your reality for free. Another layer is the use of silence, not frozen silence, chosen silence. A pause belongs to you when it is held on purpose. It interrupts the reflex to over-explain. It gives your nervous system time to settle. It lets their certainty hang in the air where it can be seen as a tactic instead of a fact. If speech continues, a ledger style helps. Short entries, few adjectives, no pleading, no moral theater. Certainty Hijack thrives on theater because theater creates confusion. Clarity starves it. There is a social dimension. People who run this pattern often rely on private rooms. They thrive where there is no witness, no shared reference point, no neutral anchor. They do not like daylight. Daylight makes their certainty compete with other perceptions. This does not require recruiting a crowd. It requires ending isolation. A small, factual note written close to the event becomes an anchor, not a weapon. An anchor, a date, a sentence, a shift in tone, the moment a label was installed. This can be private. The act of writing stops the mind from spinning. It tells the inner narrator that reality is still being kept. The same anchor can be internal. A body signal often arrives before the mind admits anything. A tight throat, a shallow breath, a subtle flinch when a certain tone appears. The body does not argue about wording. It registers threat and pressure. Certainty Hijack often begins by making you distrust that signal. A strong defense is treating the signal as data, not as a verdict. If there is a hidden hunger for approval, fog becomes tempting. If there is a buried fear of being seen as harsh, truth gets softened until it disappears. If there is a secret need to be perceived as pure, false guilt becomes the price of the image. The shadow is not evil. The shadow is leverage when it stays unnamed. A person can name those soft spots without making them an identity. I want to be liked. I hate conflict. I fear being misunderstood. I fear being seen as selfish. Once named, those forces lose their stealth. They can be present without steering. The mind can feel the fear and still hold the fact. Machiavellian realism adds one more angle. Some people do not argue to reach truth. They argue to gain position. They use certainty like a flag planted in the ground. If you fight the flag, you look unstable. If you accept the flag, you kneel. The clean move is disengagement from the flag itself. It is a step to the side, away from the performance arena. Disengagement can look boring. The exchange becomes shorter. Topics stay single. Endings become clean. Late-night rewrites stop receiving long replies. Vague moral lectures get met with silence or a plain sentence. Exposure reduces, the nervous system recovers, the mind stops rehearsing. Peace returns because the fog no longer has constant access. A person claims to care about understanding, then interrupts the moment understanding starts. A person claims to value honesty, then punishes any honesty that does not flatter their frame. A person claims to seek repair, then treats every repair attempt as evidence that you were guilty all along. The contradiction is not an accident. It is the lock on the room. It keeps you stuck explaining yourself while they keep the authority to interpret you. Micro-contradictions often come as small phrases. I am just being direct. I am only saying this for your good. I am not judging you. I am telling you how it is. These phrases sound harmless. They also create immunity. They say any discomfort you feel is your issue, not my impact. They shift the entire burden onto your inner world. Another signal is the sliding scale. The standard changes after you meet it. You answer calmly, and calm becomes cold. You show emotion, and emotion becomes unstable. You offer detail, and detail becomes an excuse. You offer brevity, and brevity becomes avoidance. The rule is not the rule. The rule is that the person stays above the rule. This is why the pattern feels endless. There is no winning condition because the goal is not clarity. The goal is submission to an interpreter. A person can spend months trying to be the perfect communicator and still feel wrong because the game was never about communication. It was about jurisdiction over meaning. There is a moment when the hijack becomes visible. It is when you notice you are preparing for conversations like a trial. You rehearse lines, you gather proof, you plan your facial expression, you measure your tone. You anticipate which words will be twisted. You start living one step ahead of your own life. That is not growth. That is captivity with a polite label. If every interaction requires armor, the environment is not neutral. If your mind needs constant defense, the cost is already too high. The wise move is not better armor forever. The wise move is changing the conditions. Fate acceptance enters here as a hard relief. Some people are not reachable by explanation. Some people use your explanation as raw material. They do not take your words in as information. They take your words in as leverage. Acceptance is not surrender to them. Acceptance is surrender of the fantasy that clarity alone will fix a power game. The body can be used as an early warning system. Not as superstition, as pattern recognition. The stomach drop that happens right after a calm correction. The tiny heat in the face when the invisible crowd is invoked. The sudden urge to apologize when you have done nothing wrong. These sensations are often the first evidence that the frame is being stolen. When those signals appear, the mind often reaches for a strategy that looks noble. It reaches for kindness. It reaches for extra context. It reaches for long explanations, hoping sincerity will dissolve the fog. In a normal exchange, sincerity can help. In Certainty Hijack, sincerity becomes fuel. It gives them more material to echo, twist, and file. It increases your investment in being understood by a system designed to misread. A quieter approach exists. The approach is not cold. It is accurate. It keeps your inner narrator on the job. It keeps your emotions as private weather, not as courtroom evidence. It keeps the conversation in the world of events, where facts can breathe. Even the word sorry can be handled with precision. In a healthy moment, sorry means I regret an impact and I want repair. In Certainty Hijack, sorry becomes a signature under their frame. A person can express care without signing away meaning. Care can be spoken as respect for the other person's experience while still holding your own. That split, care without surrender, is where dignity lives. Over time, a pattern becomes visible. Their certainty is not infinite. It feeds on reaction. It feeds on the chase for approval. It feeds on the need to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding. When the payment ends, the spell weakens. When the performance ends, their calm looks like costume. When the debate ends, memory becomes solid again. The end of this pattern is simple. You do not win by proving you are right. You win by refusing to live inside someone else's certainty. You keep your perception intact. You accept what you cannot change. You walk away with your inner narrator still employed.